Today we've got questions on the Holy Roman Empire, Blessed John Felton, and Charles answers what royal marriage changed the trajectory of history the most. Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a polarizing Charles Coulombe.
Polarizing? Polarizing?
Yeah, you're polarizing.
What do you mean polarizing? I'm not polarizing. I bring people together. I'm a man of reconciliation and peace. Aren't I?
I don't think so. I don't know. It's either you're this or that. You're pro chow mein sandwich or anti. You're pro candy corn or anti. Choose your side.
How about candy corn sandwiches? I hadn't thought about that one, did you?
Why do you have to say these things?
Why? Oh, because I'm attacked. I'm assaulted. Now you're blaming the victim.
Victim of what?
Victim of an assault on the integrity of my polarization.
How about your assault on our sensibilities?
Well, firstly, if your sensibilities are easily agreed by anything I have to say, I would earnestly suggest that you review what your sensibilities are and determine if you even have any.
I've already conducted the review, and my sensitivities are perfectly fine.
Yeah, well, I want to see that in the peer-reviewed journal. I want to see that in the National Institute for Mental Health's weekly or something. I don't know. Well, here it is. I may be polarizing, but you see the new flags behind me in the new apartment. Now, two of them, actually, the Croatian flag you can barely see. It's off there. The Dannebrog is behind the camera, so you can't see it, but I can. You see the Carillon de Sacré-Cœur there, and you see the Doppeladler, but you see a new flag, the red ensign of Canada.
Nice.
Flag until 1965. And I've already had people say to me, how can you have such a violently French-Canadian nationalist flag coupled with this British-inspired imperial flag? And the answer is very simple, really. The one provided the means whereby the other could develop. Because I guarantee you, if it weren't for Canada, we would have been anglicized a long time ago. They would have been just like the French Canadians in New England. That is my immediate people. Totally anglicized. Instead of having the Quiet Revolution and having our souls taken away from us while retaining the French language, which I don't know that was much better. Anyway, nevertheless, I am here now in New Digs, here in beautiful downtown Trumau, literally. I mean, literally downtown Trumau. And they did not come about by magic. I have to do a shout out now. Firstly, for the moving crew that brought me here. Alfonso Manana and Thoitz. I can do this. Cole Shields. Who else? There were quite a few. Don't want to forget anybody. Hannes DeMeo, Joe Pillion, and I would be very much remiss in leaving out the two brothers Tarek, Uri, and Basil, because they didn't just help move everything the way everyone else did, for which I'm terribly grateful. They also designed the room. They rearranged things, put up the flags, and so I thank them by declaring them to be Tarek Brothers Interior Decorators. And I gave them a motto that they, for some reason, a little disgusted at. We create spaces where you can be you. For some reason, they look, I don't know, a little nauseated.
I think that would sell.
I think so too. I think they've got a fortune ahead of them. I mean, forget about Trudeau in the old world. These kids will be the toasts of Beverly Hills.
They live in Beverly Hills?
What's that? No, they live here. Obviously they'll need a huge backer, but they could be the toasts of Beverly Hills.
Okay.
I myself have been toasted in Beverly Hills.
Indeed.
So you see, no, but I'm really grateful to the guys for putting this all together for me. I could never have done it without them, and so that's the first order of business to get that out of the way. Now, having said that, today is in fact the feast of good King Wenceslaus, who looked out on the feast of Stephen. Tomorrow, Sunday, the day before most of you will be seeing this, is the feast of St. Michaelmas. And I'll tell you, it's one of my favorite feasts in the whole year. I love Michaelmas. In England, they do it. They celebrate with goose. However, we're going to be having other holidays coming up. October the 7th, of course, is the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary, the anniversary of the Great Battle of Lepanto. The second Monday in October will be Columbus Day. Not Indigenous Peoples Day, not I'm so woke you can shoot me Day, Columbus Day. But it is also Canadian Thanksgiving. So actually not this, it won't be this Sunday, this Monday. It'll be the following Monday. How will that work? No, because Monday is the 30th. So it'll be 2 weeks yet before Columbus Day / Canadian Thanksgiving Day. Now I know you're going to give your staff the day off for one of those holidays. Which one? They'll fall on the same day.
Columbus Day.
So what about Canadian Thanksgiving?
Okay, look, I'm Italian. Okay, Columbus Day is a big deal.
So, yeah, but what about Guy Lombardo? Who celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving?
Well, he was Canadian.
He was Italian. He was as Italian as you are.
Don't go there, Charles. Don't.
All right, never mind. Let's skip along. No, but so I'm in my new digs. I spent the last weekend. I was at the Danish Latin Mass Men's Retreat in Denmark, and I witnessed the first Tridentine Mass in the local Lutheran church in 500 years. And what's interesting about it is that the altarpiece of the church is the Pietà, but instead of our Lord being cradled by Our Lady, he's being cradled by God the Father. And the Reredos was created about 1500, and then at the Reformation it was hidden away in a loft or something. It was only rediscovered and remounted over the altar about 1900. Well, the priest who offered the Mass said to me that as he elevated the host and the chalice, he looked right into the eyes of God the Father, or they looked right into his eyes. And I said, I don't mean they moved, but that was the effect. And I said, isn't it interesting that the very effect that the artist was going for over 500 years ago still works?
Wow.
So that was a great time, and it was good seeing the guys. And I saw Max Galenius, who's the head of St. Eric's Legion, which is a Swedish outfit. So, people are coming into the church still in Scandinavia. And I offered the question, we're losing a lot of people in Latin America. due to the church's embracing liberation theology and not talking about Jesus and salvation. So the Pentecostals are cleaning out. Wouldn't it be funny if we got a chunk of Scandinavia back? The way, I mean, because they always say we got Latin America to make up for the loss of Northern Europe. What if we get a chunk of Northern Europe back to make up for the loss of a chunk of Latin America? You never know.
That'd be neat.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, just maybe, you could, go to some all-you-can-eat smorgasbords or whatever.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, I mean, smorgasbord's a very Scandinavian thing. So maybe,
Okay.
You remember the late lamented Sir George's in Arcadia?
Yeah, Sir George's. That was a buffet.
It's a smorgasbord. It wasn't just buffet. It was smorgasbord.
What's the difference?
The one is Scandinavian.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
So St. George's had Scandinavian owners.
Well, no, they were actually New York Jewish, but they liked Scandinavia.
Okay, then. So
What
okay.
do you think the Acapulco chain is owned by Mexicans? Ha!
All right, I won't argue this point. I guess you got me, Charles. You got me there.
Yeah, I think I do. Do you think Panda Express is owned by Chinese?
Yeah, but that's.
Do you think McDonald's is owned by Scotsmen?
Well, is McDonald's a smorgasbord too? What do you say?
That would be something. If there was a McDonald's buffet, would you trust it?
I think I would trust it that it wouldn't kill me, but I don't know if I would trust it to be good.
Okay, well, that's a start.
Yeah, I guess it's a start, right? Like, okay. I mean, I'm just picturing fast food in bundles. It's like, okay.
And left out under a heat lamp.
Well, I mean, I've eaten gas station food like that before. I've eaten a hot dog or two like that.
All right.
All
right.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever eaten such things?
Well, of course. Yeah. Of course I have. I mean, well, what does a resident of Seabrook Village, New Hampshire, have in common with a hot dog?
Wow. I don't know.
They're both inbred.
Oh, no.
What? Just asking.
If someone looks up the Wikipedia of Seabrook, is it going to say that?
No, it probably won't.
That's just local knowledge? Like, yeah, those people at Seabrook. A lot of inbreeding going on.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Seabrook NH inbreeding. I read it. Seabrook NH, right on the beautiful coastal homes. And somebody put in here we go. So strange to see a McMansion in Seabrook. The cartoon Dog Patch was based on Seabrook. And Brookers were famous for the high rate of albinism and splayed fingers because of all the inbreeding. Times have changed. Tracing Seabrook through 8 generations of Eatons. That's one of the three surnames. Oh, that's funny. Resident Evelyn Fowler is emphatic she did not write the recently released book on the Eaton family. They have 3 names: Eaton, Fowler, and Watts. Yeah, the book is Fowler estimates that more than 90% of native seabrookers have an Eaton ancestor. Yeah, they sure do. Oh, golly Moses. The Brooker look. Oh, Seacoast Online, breaking the cycle of incest. What a terrible thing to talk about.
I love that title. So dramatic. Breaking the cycle of incest.
Move out of Seabrook. Uh, yeah, but this lady. She's a survivor, but she's not from Seabrook. She's Japanese, and it happened to her from her family in Chicago, so she doesn't count as a Brooker. But yeah, Seabrook with results about inbreeding.
The town is 96%
Yeah.
white.
Oh, that it is. Oh, it sure is. Yeah, Seabrook. Yeah, Seabrook, New Hampshire. My heart fills with love.
All right. Anything else before we
I'm
start?
not even.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not even related to anybody in Seabrook, and I feel close to it.
Well, you seem very fond of New Hampshire towns and people in general, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and actually all New England, and New York, and Pennsylvania, and Jersey, and the South, and Ohio, and the Midwest, and the Southwest, and the Northwest, and California, and Hawaii, and Alaska. I embrace all 50 states. I am not polarizing.
Okay, very good, Charles. Very good. All right, let's do some questions. Helvicio. Oh, Helvicio has a comment. He says, I hope that Charles has a great time in Denmark. I understand that Denmark is one of only 5 countries in Europe where the majority have a favorable opinion of America. The other 4 are Ireland, United Kingdom, Italy, and Poland. Most of the thanks for keeping us sane goes to the mental hygiene czar, Don Vincenzo. Charles brings us the erudition and the fun, but Vincent keeps everything from going off the rails into the Mariana Trench of all rabbit holes. All right.
Hey, I feel triggered.
Why?
Well, basically, what he's implying is that if you were there to crack the whip, somehow I would unleash this howling freak show of madness. This sort of weird Lovecraftian combination of something or other and something or other.
Well, would you even see that as a negative?
Not an election year.
Not an election.
Not an election year.
Okay.
No. I actually think that if on election night Cthulhu rose from his Bandinrillia and the great old ones entered our reality, I think it might improve television ratings.
Well, that's for sure. I don't feel like that's a stretch to say at all.
No, probably not. It's actually probably rather conservative. I do feel a little bad though that I won't be there for you on election night.
Do you?
No.
Well, okay.
But I did feel it was something I ought to say.
Okay, well, yes, it is something that you ought to say and feel. We don't need empty
now
words.
You're going a bridge.
Oh, now it's a bridge too far?
Oh, then why are we having an election, smart guy? You can't answer that one, can you? Didn't think so. Yeah, so you don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
Well, have I told the story of Bill Stout on the show before?
No.
Election night, 1988. Are you sure?
I thought. Oh, maybe. I think I know it now. The one who is disenfranchised. He's.
The one got removed.
Well, go ahead and tell us, because I think if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's very enjoyable.
Well, Bill Stout was a reporter on NBC, but he was an old man. This is going back now to 1988. He was an old man, and he'd been with Edward R. Murrow reporting Washington, in London and all that, where the bombs were falling. And he was this sort of rough, tough kind of guy, old-time journalist. You know what I'm saying? Kind of film noir meets hard-boiled. Well, I disliked him intensely because he would advocate all the most horrible things, gay marriage and so on and so forth. But he did so with this manner, that made anything he said sound a bit more credible. Well, I disliked him. But election night, 1988, the turnout was the lowest it had been since they started counting elections, presidential elections. So Bill Stout is sitting there in the studio with these two young kids who are reporters, and the one of them says, Bill, you've been covering presidential elections since FDR. Why do you think the turnout's so low? And the minute he opened his mouth, I knew he was plastered out of his gourd. He didn't slur, he didn't fall over himself, but I knew. He goes, why? I'll tell you why. It's because the American people have finally figured out there's a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. They've finally got it in their little heads that the whole damn thing's a crock. That he was going on and on. And I was like, yeah, Bill, tell him, let it flow. And he was going on and on. They couldn't shut him up. So then they broke for station identification. And when they came back, Bill wasn't there. And he didn't resurface for the rest of the evening. Well, he died of a massive heart attack a couple of weeks later. And they did a kind of on in the air eulogy by the head of the station. And he says to Bill, his exploits at the Cock and Bull, which were a bar on Sunset Strip, I myself used to drink at. He says his exploits at the Cock and Bull were legendary. And I thought to myself, I'll bet they were. Billy, we hardly knew ye. And so from that time to this, I've had kind of a warm spot in my heart for the late lamented Bill Stout.
He advocated for gay marriage back in the 80s?
Oh yeah, and abortion and anything.
How could he do that as a person on television on the news back then? You know what I mean? Like, doesn't that get the channel in? Isn't that an indictment on the channel itself that such a person's on air?
They would say this doesn't. One reporter's opinion. This doesn't necessarily reflect the views of KNBC, the NBC network, or anybody who happens to be standing by with their hands out for money.
Well, why was he on the air? Like, what was his value add?
His value add, he was a trusted reporter who'd seen it all.
Okay.
He's a rough, tough kind of guy. Let me tell you something, pal. I was in London when the bombs were falling. Don't you tell me.
Okay. All right.
The problem with kids today, they didn't go through what we went through. They didn't go through the depression of the big war. No, sir. Today's kids have it soft, easy. In my day, things were hard. You get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, you could say that if you were his generation. You can't say that in my generation.
Yes, that's true.
Kids today have it easy. We had to take the tops off our own bottles and pull the tabs off our own cans. It just doesn't have the same.
Yeah, in our day, we didn't have these fancy calculators, and we didn't have ChatGPT, and we didn't have cell phones. We had to do our own.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. It doesn't have the same.
We had to remember telephones. and figure we didn't have GPS. We had to figure out our own way around
Yeah,
and
we
come up
didn't
with a
have
map on our map.
GPS. Yeah, Thomas Guide. Do you even know what Thomas Guide is, bro? Don't think so.
Exactly. Exactly. Somehow that doesn't quite match. I was at the Battle of the Bulge, kid. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
And similarly, in my day, dear sweet grannies were born in the 19th century. And, oh, well, my dear, what do you call yourself? Now, dear sweet grannies are, they were, well, Pan Am chicks and cool hippies, which is not something that neither of those age well.
Yeah.
I told her, I think I was on a flight a few years ago when they had the show Pan Am on, which was set in the 1960s and, of course, followed these hot stewardesses around. Well, when it was on the air, I had to take a flight across country, really cheap airline. And the stewardesses were all, well, pretty elderly. So the guy sitting next to me on the plane says, "Ha, these aren't the chicks from Pan Am." And I said, "Oh, you're wrong, sir. They are the chicks from Pan Am." And, he just said, he couldn't disagree. He realized what I meant. Yes, I remember flying into Miami in 1966. Hot stuff.
All right.
No.
Moving on. Quick shameless plug. Sign up to become a patron for as low as $5 a month. Lot of extra content, a lot of great content in the pre-show. Made the pre-show free, available to everyone this week, but that's not always the case. So people always ask, how do we send questions? How do you send questions in? Become a patron and just send in a message, and we'll ask your question. All right. On to the questions. Are you ready, Charles?
I'm ready. I'd like to do this.
All right. Nicholas says, I have two similar questions, but one is much more contentious than the other, considering current events. First one is, wherever there is a map of the Holy Roman Empire, there is a definite border. What were the definitions of that border, and did it change much over time?
Well, there were several. On one level, the Holy Roman Empire was seen to extend to all Christian nations, certainly all Catholic nations. And in that sense, the kings of each of the Catholic kings played the same role in regard to the emperor that their great feudal lords played to them. And since, if you remember, in those days the state was kind of weak, seeing the empire in that way didn't seem peculiar to them the way it would to us. But beyond that, there was the area delineated specifically as the Holy Roman Empire, and that was defined by those territories and principalities directly subject to the emperor, which is a different kind of relationship. Now, they varied over time because the French were constantly pushing eastward. So, for instance, in the 1100s, the French boundary with the empire was far west of what it is now. And over the following couple of centuries, they acquired Provence, Dauphiné, Alsace, eventually Lorraine, Artois, and the border was pushed forward west or eastward to what it is now. In the 1500s, the Dutch began their rebellion against the empire. In Italy, the Papal States were part of the empire. Tuscany and all that was part of it. But after 1648, only the Duchy of Savoy was considered part of the empire. And that was very nominal. The Duke of Savoy was given the title perpetual vicar of the empire in Italy. And he held on to it not only after he became king of Sardinia, not only after the Holy Roman Empire, quote unquote, ended in 1806, but up until and after 1870, when the king of Sardinia became the king of Italy, he retained that title, perpetual vicar of the empire in Italy, and carried it until Umberto II was illegally deposed in 1946. So it varied. Uh, it's constantly being pushed forward in the West and the South. But it also moved eastward in the early Middle Ages as they colonized a lot of Slavic lands, eventually extending all the way into Pomerania and Silesia and all that. So yes, it varied a great deal over time. Uh, by by 1789, it was quite restricted.
All right. One addition. Have you ever watched one of those border timeline videos, like through history, where
Yeah.
it goes year by year and it's a map of Europe and it shows the changing border
Yes.
by year? That's one of the coolest videos I've ever seen. Because it's amazing how everything is constantly changing, especially
No.
at certain periods, and how fragmented. I had no idea that Europe was that fragmented at times.
Yeah. No, it certainly was. Which, again, is why we think purely in terms of a centralized state, and it didn't exist.
And just seeing the rise and fall of all the empires, where you see a sort of trend happening, and this one empire is starting to balloon, and then it collapses, and all these little fragments happen. And then I remember one of the most interesting ones was I don't want to say it's the 1200s or something like that, around there, where the Mongols come in and they just go
They
over
absorb.
everything. They just absorb everything.
Yeah.
So
They roll over everything in their path.
I highly recommend, but then they disappear quickly too. So I highly recommend Googling that and seeing it. It's really fun. All right. My second question is, what defines the borders of Ukraine as they were in, say, 2013, before the recent conflagrations? To my knowledge, the borders are neither along mountains nor rivers, except some of the western borders. My guess is that the borders of the oblasts are old and simply got used starting at Ukrainian independence, but I really have no clue.
No, your gut feeling was correct. Ukraine's, it was in fact the oblasts. Donbass was tacked on to Ukraine in the 20s by Stalin, Crimea in the 50s by Khrushchev, for the express purpose of keeping Ukraine tied to Russia. Part of the problem is that you'd be very hard put to come up with an absolutely ironclad boundary for Ukraine, except on the basis of oblasts that they administered.
All right. Pa has a question. He said, "Hey, Charles, what is your opinion on the current crisis regarding the crown princess of Norway's oldest son? Do you believe the Norwegian monarchy will survive one of the biggest crises yet? If you need a refresher, the oldest son is the crown princess's child from another relationship. He abused his exes and been doing cocaine partying all the time. He might have sold some cocaine from his home in the royal estate and had a party at one where silverware was stolen. The Hells Angels might have been involved with that last one."
So what? I mean, the two things come to mind here. One is that people yap about how terrible it is. The days were terrible when royals were only allowed to marry other royals. Well, there was a reason for that. Now that they can marry commoners, Well, they get what goes along with commoners. It's unfortunate, but there it is. But the second thing that bothers me is whenever there's a scandal in a monarchy, you always say, "Oh, will this endanger the monarchy? Will the monarchy fall?" Um, why didn't, when President Clinton turned the White House into a bordello? Oh, is the Constitution about to burst into flame? Oh, is the Republic about to fall? Oh, well, I don't get it. Why not? Why, if we're going to identify the institution with the person currently doing it, then I would say Teapot Dome should have closed down the White House. Oh, it's over. President Harding was surrounded by crooks. The Republic must be abolished. Rip up the Constitution. It's created a haven for crooks. Or when Mr. Justice Fortas had to be thrown out of the Supreme Court because of criminal activity, certainly the Supreme should have been disbanded. Well, I mean that's the basis, right? If an institution is not constantly staffed by people of 100% moral probity, it should be abolished. That's what we're saying.
I guess that is what
and if there are scandals,
go on, sorry.
They should end.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm sorry. If there are scandals, that means the government for whom the scandals occur have to be abolished. I mean, after COVID, all government should be abolished. The problem is who would pay us welfare?
Maybe it's this thing that is embedded in people's psyches. So we've talked about this before a lot. People have different standards for monarchies compared to politicians. People have high standards for monarchies.
Which means that on some level, they know that republics are crap.
Realistic.
That's what I said.
No, I mean that's I'm kind of speaking for what these people would say. They say realistic. It's not. There's in speaking with these sorts of people, there's always a sort of fatalism. Well, that's the best we could do, right? There's some sort of acceptance of corruption.
Maybe it's the best maybe it's the best you deserve, and maybe the politicians do reflect their subjects. It's quite possible. Look at the divorce rate. Look at the people who look at the majorities in most, if not all, states who want abortion. Maybe they need to be owned by slime bags. Maybe as peoples, the peoples of the earth today need to be owned wholly by scum. Maybe that's what we need. At least we have it, whether we need it or not. And if there's anything that's a whisper of maybe there could be something better, we have to attack it. If there's any remnant of something that isn't sewage, it's got to be destroyed.
I feel like most moderns, I feel like their view and why they think, oh, is this the last thing for the monarchy? I feel like they view monarchy like this, like some fragile antique that finally falls off the shelf or something, since it's on its way out anyway.
You mean like freedom of speech?
Well, that's a big jump. Okay, I guess so. I guess
no,
like
it's
freedom
not.
of speech.
It's an antique thing that is disliked by the majority of people in power. Not unlike monarchy. It's this remnant of bygone days. But fortunately, people like Sir Keir Stormtrooper, the new Prime Minister in Britain, are sworn to destroy it.
I'm sorry.
What?
Could you repeat the name? What did you say?
Secure Stormtrooper. Starmer. I'm sorry.
Okay, I was like, is this Star Wars or something?
No. It's Stormtrooper. Starmer.
Okay.
He's vowed to. Now, mind you, there are knifings in London every day, but he's concentrating on cleaning up the internet of bad thoughts, of hate thoughts, and so on. And of course, in Germany, the government are very upset because the Alternative for Deutschland came in first in Thuringia and second in Saxony and Brandenburg. Oh, this is anti-democratic. This is horrible. There's even this wonderful thing in a Berlin paper. This psychologist said, democratic parents, giving them guidance on dealing with right-wing children. Oh, but we don't define what those words mean. Democratic means you're a slave of the oligarchy, and pro-right means, far right means you don't know what you're talking about. Could that be true? I don't know. I'm just asking on behalf of our studio audience.
How much do you think? So let's talk about freedom of speech, and let's talk about how people talk now and sort of the boundaries. So I would say language in general, in the English language, I would say it has contracted considerably on the basis of poor education and poor vocabulary.
Well, that is true. I mean, that's a reality by itself.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So, but do you think that there's going to be an additional contraction for specific
for ideological reasons?
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, you've got the growth of ignorance through the decay of schooling, married to this ideological purging of the language. I guess ideological binging and purging. But no, you have these are two realities at the same time, and they actually feed off each other. Because the more ignorant your subjects, the more you can manipulate them. And the more you manipulate them, the more ignorant they become. Because remember, it's not just when you teach crap, it's not just that you're teaching crap, you're also not teaching useful stuff.
Right.
Only so many hours in a day. And if I'm giving you, gender studies and leathercraft and so forth, I'm not teaching you history and literature. So, and you'll come out of such an education angry, upset, annoyed, and not really knowing anything. And also without a real marketable skill or anything useful, which will, make you even more annoyed. Why can't I get a job? It's because the system's stacked against me. Well, you're right, because the system demands people who know what they're doing and can actually work and produce something. So in that sense, the system's stacked against you.
Well, okay. How about this? Because so you're talking about people who have poor education, poor vocabulary, haven't developed the skill set to sort of compete in the marketplace. So let's extend that thought further in time. Say, okay, let's get our people properly educated. Let's get them homeschooled. Let's get them smart. Let's get them an advanced skill set. So wouldn't that basically beget a revival of sorts in terms of Catholic influence and ability?
Well, I mean, it depends depending on who's doing it, but yes, the under whoever's aegis learning is recovered, that individual or that group will have a real step ahead of getting their worldview to predominate in the country. And also, don't let's underestimate the importance of, shall we say, non-academic pursuits. I recently talked to a brilliant kid in Denmark who's actually a welding apprentice. There are very few welders left in Denmark, and most of them are elderly. Well, that's actually a key thing. We can't all be teachers. We can't all be university professors. We can't all be freelance writers. Somebody has to actually do the real work. And that has to be paid close attention to. There's been recently, I think, a Catholic technical school has opened up, a technical institute. The people back in are Orthodox Catholics. I think that's a great idea, an absolutely great idea. I'm all for things like TAC and all that our beloved ITI, but I think we need Catholic tech schools as well. And for that matter, considering how so few women are really taught household skills anymore, we probably could do with a few Catholic home economics things,
Yeah. I'm a little surprised you're talking about a revival, a little bit of development in this sense, because I feel like we've kind of talked about this before, but more in the political sphere, because it's been bewildering that the stupidest of people are coming to the top. And
yes.
So I guess my question was, why aren't the smarter people getting ahead in this area?
Well, there's several reasons. One is, of course, to get ahead politically has become extremely expensive. You need a ton of money, and that usually is only going to come from one of the interest groups. But the interest groups are very much stupid politicos are very helpful for what they need. So that's one thing. The second thing is that the media will destroy you if they can. So if you're a prospective conservative politician, you've got a real job, a real family, and all that. The idea of having your life exposed and knocked around by the media will not appeal to you. And there are a lot of other considerations, but and primarily, it is kind of a stacked game. You saw how in France, all of the parties united to keep the Front National out of power. And these are people who are supposed to be opposed to each other, socialists and Gaullists and all that. But they formed a democratic front. Okay. So basically what you're saying is none of your differences mean anything. And you're really all the same bunch of people just holding on to power. And your differences, so-called, are simply to mobilize your base and get them excited against each other. I get it.
All right. Sounds like Christoph's book that I was talking about in the pre-show, End of Democracy. The entire end game is always simply power. It's not ideals.
Nope. It is not.
All right. Let's do a question from Vendée Radio, who says, "Dear Charles, please can you tell the story of the layman, Blessed John Felton?"
Well, Blessed John Felton was executed under Elizabeth, and basically what happened was that he tacked a copy when in 1571 Pope St. Pius V excommunicated Elizabeth I and deposed her in a bull called Regnans in Excelsis. And Blessed John Felton tacked it up on the palace door. And that got him a treason trial, and he was executed. His brave thing was martyred for the faith and all that. I'll just say, though, that I really think Elizabeth's excommunication was allowed to wait far too long, because she had assumed the throne on the promise that she would maintain the faith, the settlement that her sister Mary had put in, reuniting the English Church with Rome. And it was on that basis that she was recognized as legitimate, although, strictly speaking, she wasn't. So when she broke her word, that would seem to me to void the Holy See's side of the agreement, in which case she should have been deposed in 1556 or whatever it was, and not 1571, when a majority of people would have gotten behind it. By 1571, it wasn't going to happen.
Okay. John says, what royal marriage changed the trajectory of history the most?
I would say, and there are many other possibilities, but the one that really comes to mind is Philip of Burgundy and Juana of Spain, who brought together the Holy Roman Empire. Juana was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, and brought Spain and the New World. Philip was the son of the Holy Roman Emperor, and Mary of Burgundy, who brought the Habsburgs, the Netherlands, and Lorraine, and all that. But not Lorraine, but Artois, and Franche-Comté, and so on. When those two married, this enormous empire was assembled, and the beneficiary was their son, Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire, Charles I of Spain, the first man under whose aegis, upon whose empire the sun never set.
Okay. All right, very good. Let's see. We've got one last question for the episode. It's a really powerful question from Alberta Monarchist. All right. He says, "Greetings once again, gentlemen. Sadly, my latest question is a rather dour one. I have noticed that Charles has been talking frequently about the need to treasure fathers. But what about if the father is a schmuck, a rotten scoundrel, and a thoroughly unpleasant fellow to have dealings with? In my case, I have to deal with the pain of rejection by my father for almost my whole life to date. Specifically, my dad has never tried to hide his disappointment and embarrassment that I am autistic. Therefore, I have been neglected, ignored, and emotionally starved by my father in favor of my younger brother, who has always been treated as the most favored son. I wish to clarify that while I do love my dad, after all, I am alive in part because of him, I also thoroughly dislike him, and I have good cause to do so, as I'm sure you can well appreciate. If this wasn't bad enough, my relationship with my father is very one-sided, because I'm usually the one who initiates contact, while my father rarely contacts me, and when we talk, he quickly gets bored of the conversation, makes excuses, and says goodbye. Despite all this, I do try to follow St. Paul's admonition to repay evil with good by occasionally offering my dad what I think are considerate and thoughtful gifts, only for them to be rejected every time. My father never gives me ideas of how my gift giving could be better received. I really don't know what more I can do. My prayers for his conversion appear to have no effect, just like my prior efforts to evangelize him have also failed. In fact, My dad is just as opposed to the faith as he has always been. Although it pains me to say this, when my old man dies, I won't miss him, and it's unlikely I will even shed a tear for him. Don't get me wrong, I will be sad at his passing, but it'll be the type of sadness at what our relationship should have been, but never was, and of reflecting over many times down the years when I reached out and tried to connect with my dad, only to be spurned each time. Therefore, my final and most significant question is this. What advice would Charles give to someone like me who has been stuck in the rejected son category through no fault of his own?
Well, Albertson, um, unfortunately, that is a question that applies to a great many young men today, I'm sad to say. What you're doing about it is correct. As far as your prayers not having any effect, really, you can't know until he dies whether or not they've had any effect. And the circumstances of his death may be such that you won't know even then. So, what does one do? Well, firstly, you have to lower your expectations. You're not wrong to continue to try to reach out to him, but don't expect to get anything in return. You know, it's something you do pro forma out of duty, but you can't really expect this leopard to change his spots unless he's on his deathbed or there's some terrible action. But other than that, you know, when you reach a certain age, you're frozen in certain patterns, and he is what he is, what he is. Beyond that, however, he is your father, and so you do have to keep on doing some of the things you're trying to do with him, even though in earthly standards it looks as though it won't go anywhere. Now, it also is a warning to you. Fatherhood, and unfortunately, so many of your peers and people younger than me, a few of my own age, have had this terrible experience where rather than being number one in their father's scale of interest, they're, 2, 3, 12, whatever. It's just not that important. My generation were often very bad that way. Well, sorry about that. So you have to do better. Not just you, but any of your peers hearing this and seeing their own reflection here, it's the same. You simply have to try to be better men than they were. And it's very hard. But if you have children, make sure they know that they're your first interest. They're more important to you than anything else. They have to know that. That doesn't mean you coddle them. That doesn't mean you give them everything you want, or they want, rather. It means, though, that you give them, that they know that they are the most important things in your life. If they have that, if they have your love and your understanding and your care, then they'll be able to stand up to a lifetime of affliction. If they don't, well, as you've seen, Albertan, it's much, much, much more difficult. I wish I had an easy answer for it, but if I did, I'd have an easy answer for the problems of my generation, and I don't. We are, as I like to say, the only generation I've ever read about that grew old without ever growing up. And when you're a little one, you're the most important. Other people not important. Me. And that's where a lot of our bad fathers and mothers come from. It's not that they set out to be evil. It's just that they're self-absorbed, and their hapless children can't compete for attention with themselves. So try your best and don't let that be you.
So your part of your actionable advice was try to let the dad know that he's. I thought you said one of the most important things in your life. Is that right? To let him know that
Well,
he's
the
important.
father, no, if you're a father, you have to make your kid know
Oh, okay.
he's the most important thing in your life. And that's it. If you've got a messed up relationship with one or both of your parents, there's not a lot to be done about it, really. Except you can use it as a pattern for what not to do with your own kids.
Okay, so in terms of communication and interaction, what do you recommend?
I recommend that you reserve it to state occasions, birthdays, Christmas, etc. If you do that, if you make it almost a ceremonial thing, then his ability to hurt you will be reduced, although his ability to see you more clearly may be increased.
That sort of makes sense. That's still so unpleasant, though. I mean, it's like, oh, well, it's Christmas time, so I'm going to suffer this person, and here it comes, and there it went.
Yeah.
In terms of, so we've talked about some of the last things that you want to say to your parent before they pass away, so to protect yourself so you don't regret anything. Do you think in these sorts of contexts that is in play? And, And for those of you who and for those who haven't don't remember the previous discussion, this was, what is it? Thank you, I forgive you, I'm sorry, and I love you. Some of those things.
Yeah. I love you, I forgive you, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's in play.
Because that's very much so. Because you can't help, at least on some level, loving the being that helped give you life. And on some level, it's very hard not to somehow hope that your relationship will change and to seek to make things different. But unfortunately, very often they don't change. And then you just have to get beyond that, and you have to, you have to end up taking charge of your own adulthood. You can't leave it up to him or them anymore.
Is part of the equation, I'm trying to, so obviously I'm not familiar with the circumstance, obviously, in terms of that dynamic with dad, but I am familiar with I have experienced being close to a person, and that person makes you insecure insecure about yourself and makes you wonder, are things your fault? So isn't that part of the thing here?
That's called gaslighting.
Right.
It's called gaslighting. But yeah, it often is. It often is. And see, there you get into a difficult position because on the one hand, maybe you are partly to blame. But on the other hand, no amount of blame on your side can make up for certain kinds of behavior. In other words, you may be slightly rude to me, but that doesn't justify my punching you in the face.
Because
I emphasize slightly rude.
And I say this as a person where the personality trait, like, I'm a people pleaser. I like to. I like it when people get along with me, right? So you want to do things out there that make that other person happy, and perhaps other people are there struggling with their father or a loved one in this way. And when you're a people pleaser type of person, you carry the burden. And I personally feel like part of it is saying, you know what, I'm actually fine. this is entirely on you.
Well, and that's certainly it's a very hard realization to come to with a parent. Number one.
Yeah, I see.
Number two, I mean, I agree with you, but it's a very hard realization to come to with a parent. It's funny. For the first 2/3, 3/4 of one's life, the parents hold all the emotional cards. But for the last quarter, it's the children.
Mm.
Uh, when Alberta Monica's father is in the rest home or in hospice, he may find things change considerably. And if they do, the best thing to do would be to pretend that nothing had ever happened. Because otherwise you're holding on to bitterness and it won't do any good. Mutatis, I remember Admiral Horthy, as you know, betrayed Blessed Emperor Karl terribly. When he was dying, he called the Archduke Otto to his side and asked for his forgiveness after all that he had done to Otto's father. But, Otto gave it to him. So there you are.
Mm.
It is tough. I wish these things were all easier. I wish they were all better. It's one of the things that drives me into Perry Como-esque desire for passing out. But again, all we can do is learn from the ill that's done to us by others, and try not to do it to others ourselves. So that's about all I can say on that score.
All right. That's it for this episode, Charles. Any
What?
final words? Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
There's a kind of hush all over the world tonight. No, Herman's Hermits.
That's okay. Yeah.
Mrs. Brown, you got a lovely daughter. Girls like her are really something rare. Is that okay?
That's okay. Yeah. That's fine.
So we could do Boomer Rock Out.
Boomer Rock Out is fine. Those other titles, a little weird. I don't know, the I Need a Caveman one. I didn't care for that one. I don't like that one.
Johnny Get Angry, Johnny Get Mad. Give me the biggest lecture I've ever had. I need a brave man. I need a caveman. Johnny, show me that you really care for me.
I don't like that one. No, I do not have an emotional connection to those lyrics.
I just don't know what to tell you. I mean,
it's.
What about the time my mother socked it to the Harper Valley PTA?
Okay, go on. Tell me about that.
You don't know it?
I don't know it, Charles.
Oh boy, well you are coming to the end of the line for that. It was a song. I'm not going to sing it to you, but I'll give you the lyrics. Harper Valley PTA by Jeannie C. Riley. And the lyrics are the following. I want to tell you all a story about a Harper Valley widowed wife who had a teenage daughter who attended Harper Valley Junior High. Well, her daughter came home one afternoon and didn't even stop to play. And she said, Mom, I got a note here from the Harper Valley PTA. Well, the note said, Mrs. Johnson, you're wearing your dresses way too high. It's reported you've been drinking and are running around with men and going wild. And we don't believe you ought to be bringing up your little girl this way. And it was signed by the secretary, Harper Valley PTA. Well, it happened that the PTA was going to meet that very afternoon. And they were sure surprised when Mrs. Johnson wore her miniskirt into the room. And as she walked up to the blackboard, I can still recall the words she had to say. She said, "I'd like to address this meeting of the Harper Valley PTA." Well, there's Bobby Taylor sitting there, and 7 times he's asked me for a date. And Mrs. Taylor seems sure to use a lot of ice whenever he's away. And Mr. Baker, can you tell us why your secretary had to leave this town? And shouldn't Widow Jones be told to keep her window shades all pulled completely down? Well, Mr. Harper couldn't be here because he stayed too long at Kelly's bar again. And if you smell Shirley Thompson's breath, you'll find she's had a little nip of gin. And then you have the nerve to tell me you think that as a mother I'm not fit. Well, this is just a little Peyton Place, and you're all Harper Valley hypocrites. No, I wouldn't put you on because it really did. It happened just this way. The day my mama socked it to the Harper Valley PTA. The day my mama socked it to the Harper Valley PTA.
Okay, that's the interesting one. So they're all hypocrites because they're criticizing her when they're all messed up?
Yes, that's the point, I guess.
Okay.
The day her mama socked it to the Harper Valley PTA.
All right, beautiful. It's talking trash to power.
That's right. Boomer culture.
All right. I have a question for you. What is it if it's Monday?
Please don't. No help from the audience. It's off the menu.
But what about the soul you save?
It may very well be your own.
See you next time, everyone.
God bless you all.